Hi, and welcome to the Everyday Board Game Podcast with Daniel.
And Daniel.
And today we're going to do another one of our board game breakdowns with a special guest today. We have joining us Rob Daviau.
Hello. I'm a little disappointed I'm not named Daniel, but
It's
that's
okay.
a decision that was out of my hands 50 years ago.
Right.
Yeah, I would hear you on that.
We'll forgive you this once, don't worry.
Thank you.
Actually, I don't think we've had a designer named Daniel yet join us.
No, we haven't. Or a colorblind person, for that matter.
That we know of.
I am not colorblind either.
Yeah. That's
My
all right.
name Daniel, not colorblind. Uh-oh.
So, Rob, you've had...
My best to fit in.
Yeah, no worries. You're a gamer like us, and not only just a gamer, you're a game designer. You've been doing this for quite some time. The earliest game that we're going to be talking about here in a bit is from 1999 even, but I'm sure it went on before that. How did you get started in gaming?
Well, I mean, I've been a gamer my whole life. Played board games. Was a huge role-playing gamer in the 80s and into 90s. I mean, off and on. I was a teenager in my 20s, so there were times I was being too cool for it or something. But I'd always come back to it, and I ended up getting the job at Hasbro in November of 1998, literally by answering an ad in the newspaper. It's a long story, and we don't have a ton of time.
Yeah.
But the short version is I had sort of been preparing for that job my whole life without realizing it. So when I got there, I was just qualified for just about everything.
That's awesome. That's
So-
awesome.
As you mentioned, we don't... Oh,
got
go
the
ahead.
job.
That's great. Yeah, we there's a reason I was talking to you over email, and there's a reason we invited you on specifically, and that you have one of the names that now when we see it on a board game that you had hand in developing or designing, that it's something that we look at. And that's always one that we like, even if it's a title that we're going to be talking about here in a minute, like ones that we've known growing up, like you've added some cool twists on it. So we're excited to see on how you put your own artistic vision into these games. So let us begin. We're going to go from the oldest to the newest games. I have our Board Game Geek page here, and the very first one that we have listed, unfortunately it's not showing on Twitch at this moment, it's loading at the moment, but we have Trivial Pursuit, Star Wars Episode 1.
Okay, there's two before that one, but we'll start there. So, I don't even know. I guess if it's in BGG, it went to market. I joined Hasbro in 1998, November. Episode 1 was coming out the next May. Hasbro was in this mad scramble to get a whole bunch of product ready for the launch. First Star Wars movie in 16 years. Thought it was going to be this huge deal. Turned out it was a bad licensing agreement. And so there were a number of games that I really wasn't working on, but Trivial Pursuit was one of the brands that I was hired to be involved with right from the beginning. And so when the movie came out, I got to go see it every day during work for 2 weeks with a notebook. I saw 10 work days in a row, and just wrote questions as I did it. And I need to tell you, it's not that good a movie. and seeing it 10 out of 12 days did not make it better. But day one was, I am getting paid to go see Star Wars for my job. By day 5, I'm like, this isn't fun. And by day 10, I'm like, I never want to see another frame of this again, except for maybe the lightsaber battle at the end. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
It was weird. Trivial Pursuit usually has 6,000 questions, or the first one has 6,048 was more standard, 24 for smaller, and this was 1,250, so it was a tiny little set because it was just one movie. But I realized there was one question for every 8 seconds of film time.
Oh, wow.
And so I think the joke I had around the office is the card should say, and then what? And then what? And there's good trivia questions and bad trivia questions. Like a good trivia question, you could say in the original Star Wars trilogy, how many people touched or handled a lightsaber? And then you can think about it, you can discuss it. I don't have the answer offhand, but it will take too much time to see.
Yeah.
The bad question, of which I had to write a few, or something like, what color is the shirt of the guard standing behind Amidala in the, like, who cares? Right? No one's going to notice. It's supposed to be background. If you notice them, then the customer and the director photographer and the director did a bad job, because why are you looking at that person? But there's plenty of those in there. And then because I was writing it after the movie came out, we were getting a read on how good sales were on the product. And I didn't think it ever came out, but it might have been all done and maybe they dumped it in Canada. Clearly, if it's in BGG, it had some sort of release.
Yeah, someone owns it. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So you mentioned that we missed 2 games. There was actually games before that. We were going off your website work list here. And so what games were the ones that we missed?
Well, my personal website only lists highlights, because I probably brought about 100 games to market. A lot of them
or
redo. So my first day at Hasbro, I got 2 products. One was a redo of the game Scruples, which had been a really strange party game discussion game in the 80s that they were bringing back because the impeachment trial of President Clinton was going on.
Okay.
They were trying to get some sort of buzz from that. And then the second one was Monopoly Looney Tunes. And we think, oh yeah, yet another licensed Monopoly. This was kind of new at the time, because the year before, for the Star Wars re-releases, they had done a Monopoly Star Wars, like an official licensed Monopoly, and it was like the first one Hasbro did, and it took off, and that's what started Hasbro doing the license one. There's always been knockoffs, and USAopoly are the opposites now. No, we're doing theirs, but sort of like mainstream Hasbro doing them. That was like the second one. So I walked in the first day, and those were my first 2 projects, and I was like, this is a cool job.
That's awesome. Yeah, we pulled up the Board Game Geek page, or we tried to on the live stream. Once again, my computer's going a little slow, but we had a quick moment where we were looking through it because we were wondering what makes Monopoly Looney Tunes different, and we saw that you added in some special abilities.
Yeah. Oof, let's see, 23 years ago. 22 years ago. When I came in, I basically said, okay, let me make like a Microsoft Word template of like, here are all the properties. And then here's like the Monopoly Looney Tunes. And houses and hotels become this, and money becomes this. And here's all the chance and community chest, and here's the new one. And that document was still being used when I left in 2012, like 14 years later.
Oh, wow.
For other ones. And I think I said, yeah, there should be something besides just a reprint, because otherwise it's Monopoly in new clothes. And I did something, I think it was if you rolled doubles, instead of rolling again, you could do something. And it was like wacky cartoon powers, like Bugs Bunny would do, like switch places with another player, or immediately, I don't remember what they are now.
Yeah.
The one I did read I liked was the Tasmanian Devil, where you can literally, because he goes crazy, you can take a TV station or something like that off the board.
Oh yeah, you destroy someone's like house that they had built up. Yeah, they were each named after a character. That's right. I mean, I did it and played it and sent it out into the world and haven't thought about it. I mean, that game's old enough to vote, right? Like, I mean, to drink actually. So I haven't given it much thought since then.
That's fair. All right, so we're going to go off of this list right here. The next one that we have showing is Trivial Pursuit Genus 5. And let's talk about that, because I believe that's essentially 5th edition, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Trivial Pursuit Genus edition, which everyone calls Genius edition. It's Genus edition.
Okay.
Like genus and species and stuff in biology.
Okay.
It's a Latin word. There had been 4 of them, starting in 1982 up till 1998, and I was working on the 5th one. I oversaw a lot of Trivial Pursuit projects. I'll kind of just do a global discussion of Trivial Pursuit, unless it had something like a DVD. There was a team of writers who had been working on them forever. The brand was still, the licensor, the people who invented it, licensed it to Hasbro, but because of the success, their contract gave them a lot of approval rights and say in the game. So there was always this delicate thing of, what did the inventors want? Hasbro or I just couldn't do what we wanted. Part of it was using the writing team, and to be fair, they were good. It's very hard to do. I think as I went on it and spent more time with the brand, I wanted to freshen it up with some new people. And
that's fair.
These people are fine. And it was their main source of income, so I didn't want to take that away, but I wanted to start folding in some new people. basically, I would set the categories if the categories were different. Like in a licensed game, if it was a Genesis game, the categories don't really change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe write an email just kind of saying, look, you know what to do, but maybe less of this or more of this, or let's, we kind of did a lot this last version, let's do a different version, or watch the character count, your questions are getting long, keep them short, and then they would just send batches. I would read them, usually make a few notes, not too many, and that was about it. I would be responsible for if it was a licensed game, if it wasn't just that pie wedge with the pieces in it, I would think of like, what would the pieces be? But there was a lot of resistance to do special rules or anything different, and I felt it was a mistake because you don't know, Jack had come out and trivia was sort of changing,
Right.
and the internet was expanding, and people could just get trivia, from the web at any point. So the game needed to
Right.
do more than 1982, but there was a lot of resistance to changing what had been such a sure success in '82, even though it was 98, 99, 2004, 2005. So yeah, Genesis 5. I remember the only, because I'm kind of a smartass, the only exciting thing I did is we had to do a big line review, and people were coming up and talking. I think there was new management, there was a new president. It's like, I want to see like where the line is, and so everyone's coming out and doing this game's like this, and this game, so we're going to do this, and the marketing people. And I walked out with a Genesis 4, which is a Roman numeral. So it had the IV, and I just put the box down and then took a marker and went like, crossed out the I, and I went, any questions? Like, that was it. I just did a little 10-second comedy bit, and I'm like, any questions? And he's like, really? That's it? I go, new question, same game. You got a lot of stuff to learn. He goes, all right, no, I got it. Thanks you. It's pretty funny.
What a wonderful way to sell that. That's beautiful. Oh, man.
All right, so the next game.
Yeah, there's a reason I didn't get a lot of promotions at Hasbro. I didn't take certain meetings and certain protocols seriously. I was a bit of a comedic smartass, and that really didn't. That's pro tip if you're in a corporation, people. That's not how you get ahead.
Oh man, that's
okay.
great. So the next game on that we're gonna just go off your work list right now because we're having issues with the BGG website is Access and Allies Pacific.
Yeah. Hasbro had just acquired Avalon Hill, the company and the brand, from Monarch Publishing, where it had been since it started in the early 60s. And they were using it to kind of reboot what had been the Game Master series in the 80s. That had Fortress America, Axis and Allies, other games I can't remember right now. And so when I showed up, Larry Harris, who worked there, was doing Axis and Allies Europe. And so I got a little involved with that brand, and then also helped Craig Van Nesser's Strategic Legends, wrote the rules for the Diplomacy reboot, didn't do anything with Battlecry, and wrote the rules for Acquire. That was the first 5 games that we were doing. And then the company moved, because it liked to do that every couple of years, just to make sure everyone didn't have regular friends. And so when we moved, Larry Harris didn't follow. So Axis and Allies Pacific, which was the follow-up, he was no longer with the company. So Steve Baker, who I work for, and I took over the design leadership on that. And that was one of the crunchier games I've ever done. I mean, the setup alone has so much going on. And I remember, I'm not a big, deep World War II historian. At the time, I knew more, but I was sort of like, I'll be the one who understands some high concepts rather than specifically how Guadalcanal really differed from Midway and a couple other things, and the projection of Air Force, and I remember just having the darndest time of trying to figure out what Japan's victory condition was, because from what I could tell from what everyone was saying is Japan lost the war when they decided to bomb Pearl Harbor. Right? It was a calculated gamble, but given the U.S.'s industrial capability and appetite for revenge and a lot of other things, it was sort of a flawed plan from the beginning. So how do you start the game with Pearl Harbor but have Japan have a chance of winning? And so we had to look back and say, well, what was Japan trying to do?
Yeah, that's interesting.
And what if Pearl Harbor actually made sense for what what followed was what they hoped would follow, or that was a possibility if Japan played it right, as opposed to not being a super probability in the real world. And so we could have sort of followed that. And I remember we had to figure out air bases and naval bases and what they did and how they projected and the use of ships. And it was fun. I was 30 years old. I just bought a house. I had, a young kid, and I'd go over to my boss/friend's house, Steve, and we'd have a drink or two and just make up games for a couple hours,
That's fantastic.
And I go to work the next day and play it, and got paid. So I was like, this job is okay.
Man, I kind of want that job.
Yeah, to be fair, my job at Hasbro, we had Avalon Hill right at the beginning, and I was new and everything was great. It was just this dream job. And then as the years went on, it became more of a job, which it's always going to be.
Oh, yeah.
And the management changed, and I got frustrated that I wasn't moving ahead. See my earlier discussion, and the things I was being asked to do weren't as fun. And so really there's this arc over 14 years where either I grew tired of the job, or I wasn't a fit for the company, or it shifted the games I went into. And by the end, the last couple of years was, this is not the job for me.
Yeah.
But that beginning time, those first couple of years were just like, I'd win the lottery and show up to work tomorrow.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, exactly. You get to enjoy. So I noticed. So I'm going to bring up a game that was in 2001 that you made, and we talked about warfare and with Alexis and Allies. But this is I can already know this is the first game I played of yours. Me and my siblings grew up playing Risk 2210. Because I wasn't the biggest fan of Risk as the base game personally, but when I played this, I was like, okay, this is intriguing. I'm not even a sci-fi fan, like I'm not like, but this captured me somehow. What was your design idea going into this?
So we had put out the first year of Avalon Hill, those 5 games I named, and then the company moved, and I remember we were in a meeting room, we were talking about what else we were going to do, and Axis Now I Specific was on that list, and I forget what else. I think an expansion for Stratego Legends, we were trying to make that a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Betrayal at House on the Hill was on the list then. And Craig Van Ness, who I sat across the aisle from in Cubes, and he kind of taught me so much about game design. We did a lot of stuff, collaborative stuff. I'm sure a lot of the games, the first of many games are like, Craig and I worked on that, or that was kind of Craig's game, or this is the first one where he said, I want to do Risk Total War. I want to do Risk, but it's over in 5 rounds. And we got out of the meeting, and I kind of pulled him aside. I'm like, I want to work on that with you. And Craig's not a collaborator in the sense that he wants to kick ideas around like Steve and I did on X Hours. He wants to get a whole bunch of ideas, and then he goes off, and then he comes back, and he's like, put it all together, and it's great. So I remember we were standing sort of outside around. I think it was like heading to the bathroom, and we were outside his cube, and we were sort of like halfway between the bathroom and his cube. And he was like, what if we had like commanders that let you roll 8-siders? I was like, I'm thinking you have like underwater and the moon and space. He's like, cool. I'm like, a tech tree? He goes, no, the commanders are a tech tree. They have a deck of cards. And I was like, oh, can we throw nukes? He's like, that'd be cool. He's like, how about if there's points and it's over in like 5 rounds? And I'm like, yeah. And then I went off to the bathroom, and then I came in literally the next day, and 85% of the game that made it to market, he's like, I got it. I put it together. and I was like, what, already? And then we played, I'm like, oh, this is working. And I forget what we changed. There were a couple key things we changed in play testing, and obviously the card decks got refined, and the rules got refined, and the points and stuff like that. But that game literally went from a 2-minute conversation on the way to the bathroom to 85% done in 24 hours. And it's been on market since 2001.
Yeah.
So,
is that surprising to you, or is it kind of reassuring in a way?
It's reassuring, man. I'd love to get a royalty off that thing. That was the thing when I worked at Hasbro, is I got paid the same salary whether I had good ideas or bad ideas, and it was kind of great at the time. But there's a number of games that I put out where I'm like, ooh, that'd be fun to own, or at least have some vested interest in. Yeah, that was one of those ones where it was sort of Craig and I together on the initial ideas, and then I wrote the rules, and he refined the card decks. But I'd say it's 70-30 his game, just because he was so fast at putting it together. I was like, before I got another chance to brainstorm, it was done. I'm like, I think the only thing it had at the beginning in the map is it had if you go up around the North Pole, there was ice regions, right?
I think so.
You connect out of Yakutsk and then into Canada just to provide a different connection, and there was snow where your troops would die, and we just decided that was too much. Oh, you've played this a lot more than I have. There's some sort of the variables set up at the beginning where spaces are closed, right? Like you put like devastation zones that you can't go in. There's like 2 things that are blocked. There's a random setup thing that was like the last thing we figured out. Like, man, this is the same. Everyone picks their same setup locations, and it's sort of like chess. Like you know where to go if you're first, and so we came up with this idea of what if there were just the connections were a little different every time. So
Yes.
Okay, hold on, I can't do that plan. It doesn't make sense now.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like like how you said, like in chess, like when you play with a mixed board and it's totally different stuff. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So you brought up, and you quickly brought up the Stratego Legends. We show that. Do you want to talk about the expansions?
Stratego Legends was largely Craig. I showed up to Hasbro and he was working on it, and I play tested it. One of my favorite days on the job was I was a few months into work, and he's like, "Hey, we've got some art, some fantasy art that we bought that's like a style guide, but we paid a certain amount of money at Hasbro, and we can just take what we want from it." And sitting down for like 4 hours and finding a picture and matching it to a piece, and then I'm a writer, and I'm like, I'm going to change the name of this piece to match the picture, and then kind of coming up with the backstory that we put in there, and then I wrote a story for the game, but I was mostly doing development work on a game that was kind of largely done, and then I continued that role on the expansion. Craig was very generous at the beginning. He'd always co-credit me on things. He was sort of helping me out, and so like things like Stratego Legends, I ended up getting a co-design credit, but realistically it's more like, because BGD doesn't have a developer credit, really more it falls into dev, playtesting, rules writing, stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, it was playing off of Magic, which had come out 5 years before then.
Right.
How do you do a collectible deck builder Stratego game? And it had some good ideas in it, but it was never going to really catch on, and Hasbro wasn't going to give it the support it needed.
Yeah. Yeah, we've noticed that in a few games fairly recently too. So the next game that I show here, and I wanted to ask you real quick because I'm not familiar with In Pursuit. Is that another Trivial Pursuit variation? Or?
It is. There was another Trivial Pursuit. There was a guy I worked with, Dan Sanfilippo, and he was at Hasbro forever. He was an intern when I started, and then I had mentioned that Hasbro did this big move like a year into, where Larry Harris didn't go, and Dan was in a good place to be graduating during this move through all these openings, so he got hired as a designer right out of college, and he was there until 3 years ago, so he ended up being there closer to 17 years. And he came in and he had done a game for his senior thesis for college, which turned into In Pursuit. It was a Trivial Pursuit game. I still thought it was really clever. It didn't quite do as well, where there were 2 teams, and each team had a leader. And the person who won, and as your team answered questions, you would move forward on a track. And the person who won the game was the leader of the team that crossed the finish line first. So in the game, you could either vie for leadership of your team if you thought you were winning, or if you were on the losing team, try to switch to the other team and kick someone off onto the other team. And so you would end up one team might be doing well because they had people who are good at trivia, and then very slowly that team would end up on the other team because everyone jumped because they were 3 spaces ahead, but then the other team would catch up. And when one team was near the end, no one wanted to go over the finish line unless they were leaders, so they just started horribly infighting. I forget the rules for what it was, and then you had to sort of plan your coup.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
That's neat.
And it just it was a little too out there for people, and I believe that game and a couple other games for Hasbro were fall of 2001, and when 9/11 happened, there was this big upswell of unification in the country. So the idea of being a backstabbing, 2 political sort of factions switching and vying for power was not a great message. So I think Hasbro pulled back a lot of the advertising on it pretty quickly and on more sort of straightforward things.
Yeah, that's one of those situations. That's pretty understandable. I get it. But that's a shame if it's a fun game.
Look, one thing I've learned in my career is there's lots of fun games that aren't successful because the message was wrong, the marketing was wrong, the price point was wrong. having a great game is only the beginning to having a long, successful game. You can have a game that makes a lot of money in 1 year with a great commercial, and then people get it and they're like, this is crap, and the sales drop off. And you can have a game that starts out and just gets bigger and bigger and lasts a long time, but everything has to kind of come together.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool.
All right, so the next game on our list came out in 2002, and it's Star Wars Epic Duel, which is a precursor to a game you're currently publishing, which is one of my favorites.
Yeah, so that was for, thank you, by the way, Epic Duels or Unmatched?
Unmatched is one of my favorites. I never actually got to play Epic Duels when it was back in the day.
I used to own Epic Duels, and now I'm quite a fan of Unmatched too, because I could see how it evolved.
Yeah, well, we're having a lot of fun with Unmatched. We had a design contest just to take a little foray into modern times. And we got over 500 entries, 500 decks from about... Jeez. You could submit up to 2, so it was like 300 people or something, because some did 1. And we haven't narrowed it down. We've narrowed it down to our semifinals, which are the top 31 decks, or 0.6% of the entries. And now we put them into TTS, and we're starting to play them against each other. We're going to take at least 4. We said there would be at least 4 winners, but I'm not sure we'll be able to get... There's too many good decks to get to 4, but I don't know if it'll be 6 or 5 or 10, or maybe it will be 4. Anyway, Attack of the Clones was coming out in 2002. Mm-hmm. So in 2001, we all got into a conference room at Hasbro where they plunked down the script to Attack of the Clones. Each script had your name watermarked on it. So if you took a picture of it and it got out, they knew who took a picture of it.
Okay.
Okay.
You were allowed, like every page, like 200 pages, and Rob Daviau. And there were like 5 of us, and we were allowed to take whatever notes we wanted and discuss it. And we had like 3 or 4 hours, and then those were removed and destroyed.
Wow. I mean, we've heard of stuff like that before, but wow, that's...
Yeah, to make the game. And so there were 3 or 4 games that came out. There was Jedi Unleashed and Star Wars Game of Life, A Jedi's Path, which you may or may not be talking about. And Epic Duels. And Epic Duels was Craig and I doing a battling card game together. And like 2210, it was, what if we each had a deck of cards? What if you had 2 actions? Like, again, very straightforward. And then I went off and built the Yoda deck, and he built Darth Vader, and we played it, and we're like, this kind of works. And I think in the end game, you can see we didn't have a lot of time, that Yoda was a little too complex, and Darth Vader had like an Achilles heel, which I guess he does in the movies. And then when it worked, we designed a whole bunch. I think I did Mace Windu's, and he did Darth Maul's, and I did Luke and Leia. Maybe some other people in the office did some other ones, and he did Jango Fett. But the whole thing, from initial idea to design to playing to turning over the graphics, was like a month, because you were just making games.
Oh.
And then it came out, and people were like, oh wow, this is pretty cool. And it sort of continued and carried on, and people still come up to me at conventions and sort of talk about it. And there was a follow-up with a Transformers game that Craig did, but I wasn't involved with the brand anymore. And,
okay.
I was walking on my street a couple years ago, and at Restoration, we like to make games that are at least 15 years old. And I was like, so, okay, we're talking 2002, 2003. I'm like, that's recent. I did Epic Duels in 2000. I'm like, wait a minute, am I allowed to rip myself off? Or reboot a game I worked on. So I ended up talking to Craig. He had left Hasbro. He gave us his blessing, but it's just like he couldn't be involved because he's starting up his own company. And we started work on it.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoy Unmatched. I do want to at least try this. I know a buddy of mine that does have a copy of this game, so I want to see how it works. All I gotta say is with Unmatched, I don't know if you guys are thinking about it, but could you give us like a big box where we could put everything in one box?
No, we are thinking about that.
Cool. Thank you.
We are thinking about that. We've got a lot going on with Return to Dark Tower and some other stuff.
Yeah.
Just getting Unmatched, it's very successful for us, and so we're trying to get all the SKUs and play testing, and every time you do a new set, you've got more people to play against.
Yeah.
And I am looking forward to the Buffy expansion that's coming out, so.
Buffy's out. You can get Buffy from our website right now.
Well, I have it on pre-order with a gaming company. They just haven't got it shipped yet.
Great. So, yes, Buffy is out. If you can get it in the Mondo website, from the Restoration website, and it's coming into retail now. If you have a local store that you support,
Yep.
you can get it there.
Awesome. So I have a couple of card games that we're going to bring up real quick. That's both based off of classic board games, and that's the Game of Life, the card game, and Battleship, the card game.
One of those I really like. Which you want
Okay.
Actually, I like both of them, but one has a fatal flaw, and one I really has a soft spot. The Game of Life I like.
Okay.
And I have one kicking around the basement. I just think I did a good job with that. Now, to be fair, I haven't played it in at least 10 years. So I might look at that and go, oh no, it's okay. But for taking the Game of Life, which I feel like is a brand that tells such a good story, and then it ends up not doing it in the board game a lot of times.
Yeah.
I wanted to feel like you had a story and you could play a couple different ways. You could have a family or not have a family. And, the game was you had to choose at the beginning of the turn, you could either spend time or money. And
Okay.
then that was your currency for the turn. And then you played cards from your hand that either cost time or cost money. And then there would be certain combos. Like if you had kids, they'd be worth victory points, but each kid was -1 time from the time.
Right, which makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? And so you could end up not having any time. And then you had a job that gave you money, but it gave you less time. And then when you retired, you ended up with less money, but you got more time. So you had this income that went up and down. And you could decide to do like a career or not have kids, or if you got married, I think it was worth a certain amount of points, but you lost a little bit of time, but it was worth a ton of points. And there was some, I think in the way you had to, at least in the Game of Life, you had to get married before you could have kids. Like it's Hasbro.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I just thought it was a really fun 2-player version, and you never know how much time you had.
Yeah.
There was early life and late life, and the cards LIFE were hidden in the late part of the deck, and when all 4 came out, it was like
Game
game
over.
over. So it
Cool.
might be your 52, or it might be your 90. Like you didn't know in that late stage how much time you were going to have. So it really was weird at the end. You're like, I don't know how much time I have remaining. It's LIF on the board, so I'm just selling all my possessions and moving to a monastery. Like you could use like weird stuff.
Moving to a monastery. Okay.
I don't know if you could exactly do that, but I remember get rid of all your worldly possessions. Was like get rid of everything that cost money, and for everything you got rid of, you got like victory points or something.
Is it still on market or no?
I know it went out of print like after a year.
Oh,
But
wow.
I don't know if you can find it on eBay or something like that. I thought it was cool.
Because I'm intrigued. I'm not gonna lie. That sounds
It
like
just-
something I
yeah.
want. That's
No, again, rose-colored glasses. You might play it and go, well, it was a family weight game or something like that. It's not gonna transform your world. But I thought it was like a silly little take on things.
cool. Alright.
The Battleship one, I liked. It was a little bit like playing blackjack. You had cards that were face up and face down, and you were like playing head to head in rows, like my row of cards versus your row of cards. And you could choose to attack. You could choose to like reveal cards, and when you reveal cards, and sometimes get rid of other people's cards. And so there was a hidden sense of you would put cards face down. I don't remember how they came face up. The problem was I noticed there was a first player advantage in the game. This is the one where I said I didn't like it. And I was a young designer, so I came up with this elaborate setup to mitigate the first player advantage. And you just look at it, and it's for like 5 years old and up, and they can barely read. And it's like this player puts 2 down, and then this player puts 1, but they can put 2 if they reveal 1, and which lets them get an extra. And it perfectly smoothed it out. But why? 5 or 6. The smart answer I learned later is set it up and then say the younger player starts.
Yeah.
Right. And honestly, because it was for like a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, and the 6-year-old won't play as well, and they won't have a first player advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That makes sense.
I was designing like perfect math, but I wasn't designing for my audience, and that was an insight I had. I looked at it like 5 years later and went, what? Oh my gosh, I made so many 7-year-olds cry. How did I do that? Like I was just too young, too novice a designer to realize you need to know who the audience is. You need to design for that audience. That audience may not be you, and if other people play the game who aren't that audience, they're going to have some problems with it.
Yeah.
Like this game has a first player advantage. You're not 7.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Connect 4 does too, and that does all right.
Yeah. Right. I've heard it. I've heard of that game. I don't know. It sells some copies, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So the next game on the list that we have here, you mentioned it earlier, and that's A Game of Life, The Jedi's Path.
Yeah, that's another one I like. There's some things. It has too many clunky pieces of plastic. I became fixated on giant hunks of plastic around the board, and the spinner doesn't work. And quite honestly, if you find a copy, use a 12-sided die or 10-sided die. I got a little carried away with the spectacle. There was a floating platform spinner
Oh wow.
above
Okay.
the boards. Game of Life was cool. You played a Padawan. Do you remember with Star Wars Episode 2 where Anakin was angry teen, I guess?
Uh-huh.
And you were at the Jedi Academy, and you would go out and you could go on missions, and you eventually get to a certain point, and you would get a mentor, and you would build a lightsaber, and you were getting different tokens, LIFE again, which is like logic, intuition, fighting, and empathy, energy.
Okay.
I forget. And you wanted to sort of get different amounts of them. It would just be like a different flavor of who you were. There were a number of dark side shortcuts that were faster, easier, and more seductive, quite honestly. If you went on them, it would give you like, whereas getting tokens was like 1 or 2, you could just get like 4 fighting tokens if you stopped on this dark side path. And then when you did, you took a dark side. But there were chances to get rid of it, but not necessarily. Right, so you could dabble, but probably be fine. And then when you got to the end, if you had over a certain number of dark side tokens, your master leaves you, and you have to go down the dark side Sith path.
Okay.
Oh,
That's
right.
cool.
And if you don't have that number, then you take the Jedi trials. And if everyone goes one side or another, whoever I think has the most tokens, or the most of one token, I forget, it was the most. I think if you just have the most tokens, you win. But if you end up with one person, people on each side, whoever has the most on each side, have a battle. I think you compare your life, you compare your L, your I, your F, and your E, or something like that.
That's kind of cool. I'm a big Star Wars nerd, so this actually has me intrigued a little.
Yeah, and I ended up reading a lot of it. What was then, I think they've removed it from canon, expanded universe stuff. So the missions are all based on the novels, and at the end you get take like a little Jedi Myers-Briggs test. Like you find the token that you have the most of, and then the one you have the second most of, and you look up like I had logic and then fighting, and it's like you are assigned by the Jedi to go around and act as a judge on planetary disputes, especially in areas where justice can lead to violence because your fighting background can back up your logic as you work through. If you had intuition, you were like an investigator who did different things, who like tried to solve like mystery and work out lies and be a diplomat.
All right, time to go look on eBay.
I can definitely see this storytelling background now evolving that we're going to be.
Welcome to all my games.
Yeah.
Almost all my games are how do I tell a story,
Uh-huh.
and so this is where I was starting to figure that out.
That's yeah. You can definitely feel, because I mean, you said that you like Game of Life. It naturally does inherently tell you that story. You know, you're telling a story from life. Well, yeah, that's the goal, right? And then how can you use that mechanism to bring it out? That's cool. We don't have too much more time left, but we have a couple more that we'll
this is
talk
like
about.
part 1 of 10 or something like that. This is like a Ken Burns documentary.
Right? I know. We'll definitely bring you back. If you'd be up for it, we'd love to have you back. But we'll talk about a few more.
It's actually kind of fun to go down memory lane like this and think of some of the things that happened there. But we're up to 2002,
Yeah.
and we've got 18 more years to go.
Yeah, no, that's one thing that with all of our other designers that we've brought on and company owners, they always tell us like we'd love the going back in time, but wow, like that, the more prolific the designer, that's
There's
a
Oh,
a lot of games to talk about.
Yeah. We wanted to get Reiner Knizia to do all 800 of his game.
Yeah. He probably just remembers it was a Tuesday. Right? He just like would have it record.
Well, stories I've heard about Reiner Knizia, he's got a whole book that he could just be like, okay, this is when I thought it up.
Yeah, no, he's a very nice guy. I've talked to him on a couple calls and talked to him at conventions. He's just super organized.
Yeah.
He's a little bit of a very nice stereotype of like the organized, precise German,
Yeah.
sort of like gets up, he has a schedule, he does things in a certain precise way, and that's how his brain works. And obviously he's been very successful where I'm like sort of bang it into the furniture and like I got ideas.
That's me.
Yeah.
Oh man. So I wanted to talk. So we've talked a lot about IPs that Hasbro had, and a lot of taking intellectual property and applying it to classic games. I wanted to ask you about Spite and Malice because I had not heard of this game.
Yeah. There was a line of card games that Hasbro was trying to do of taking classics and putting some sort of proprietary spin on it, like a new way to play. There was Canasta Caliente, Spite and Malice, Hearts. Did we actually do a Hearts one? Spades? I forget. But I did Spite and Malice. At the time, I was married to my first wife. Like, we're still in my first wife phase. Like, this is going way back. And her family used to play Spite and Malice. Her grandmother used to play it, so I used to either play with her or play it with her grandmother. And I liked it, but I was always a little frustrated about some of the luck that's in the game and some of the, like, it could go on too long. You know, the deck would play you. You could do everything right. And, which is fine if people want that sort of more casual, who knows sort of experience.
Right.
Where you're lightly managing the luck, but underlying it is a little bit of the deck is going to determine the game. So when I got a chance to do Spite and Malice, I don't know what I did. I think there were Spite cards and Malice cards, and I tried to add a little bit more to it because you could play Spite and Malice with a regular deck of cards. So we needed to put something in anyway. So my thought was, how do you actually put some cards that would offset some of what I perceived were weaknesses in the game, or made it more of the game that I want to play because I was designing it. So why not?
Right.
To be fair, I haven't thought about it till you brought it up right now. At least 15 years.
All right. Well, that works.
But so I'm just gonna go ahead and assume this is gonna be the last game we talk about, which actually gets me excited because this is one of my favorite games, and probably the first one of that has your name on it that I've ever played in modern board gaming, and that's Betrayal at the House on the Hill.
All right, I can spend some time talking about this. This will be our last one. I'll spend a good 5 minutes on it.
All right.
A game called House on the Hill didn't have Betrayal at the time, or House on Haunted Hill, I forget. Landed on my desk around 2000, and it was going to be in our second Avalon Hill line. And I remember Mike Ray, who ran the department at the time, said, I don't know if this is like a Parker Brothers game or an Avalon Hill game, but I think it's really neat and different. And the game was very different from the one that was published. Tiles were in your hands. There was there was one trader book.
Okay.
The house had 6 levels: sub-basement, basement, and then floors 1 through 4. But the general idea, like a lot of the characters, and I think all the characters had the same traits, like 1 to 8. Like, so other than their name, they were kind of the same. But a lot of the characters with a lot of the Oxfellows, a lot of the same names were in there. The idea of starting with that house with the different floors, I believe, was in there, but you could get to the basement. I added that. And I played it, and I got done, and I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever played. I saw a lot of issues with it and executing it, but I was like, I want to play again. And like the whole group just played all afternoon. We very quickly realized it was an Avalon Hill game. It wasn't a Parker Brothers game. Like, you couldn't play it after playing Clue, right? As the next logical. There was too much going on, and it had some cool stuff. You could always try to win a haunt by just getting out the front door, but the front door was really hard to get out, but other people could come help you, so sometimes the players could just go there. Or you could just escape the haunt and call it a win for you if you could jump out a window. But the higher the window, the higher your die roll needed to be, and if you missed, you impaled yourself on the fence. So you had a lot more chaotic stuff, but it made some great moments. But ultimately, I was looking at it, and I decided, and I haven't played that game, in 20 years, and I'd be curious if the original designer, Dr. Bruce Glasgow, is a professor down in the D.C. area, I think in Virginia. I think he still has his prototype. It would be cool to see where it started. And then I have my prototype, because I was the middle step before it went to Wizards. I spent 15 months working on that game, doing somewhere between a development pass and a semi-redesign. And somewhere along the line, I decided that, we came up with the tile stack idea. came up with not being able to get out of the basement except finding the stairs because it was scarier because there was a lot of ways down there, and then you're like, ah. And at the time, different rooms had penalties. Like the crypt had a -3, so you rolled 3 fewer dice in the crypt unless you were the traitor. So all the basement had minuses in them. So once you get down there, it was triple. Splitting the haunt books, having people read it in different rooms, coming up with the asymmetric character powers. The items and the omens largely stayed the same, and the events largely stayed the same except to change for the current rule set. And I was like, I don't know how we're balancing this. I mean, there's 50 different haunts, and I had to take some out and rewrite some and add some. And I was, kind of humming along, and then they gave Avalon Hill over to Wizards of the Coast because Hasbro had bought Wizards of the Coast right when I started this project, and at some point, like they tend to do whenever they have like a brand that's a little bit harder, is it doesn't produce the sales that like the mass market games do, but take a lot more time. So usually after 18 to 36 months, management's like, it's not worth it for us what we do. Try to relocate stuff. So this had happened with us, and I was like, can I just hold Betrayal? It's just too hard. We tried to hold on to Risk 2210 and Betrayal, and they let me. They're like, you have like 6 more months on Betrayal. I said, I can make it a Parker Brothers game. I couldn't, but I became obsessed with it. I had like a beginner. This is where I started to go wrong with it. I had a beginner version, an intermediate, and an advanced version. There were only certain haunts and certain cards. There was like green, yellow, and red, and you took out certain tiles. And the green version was fairly straightforward. And I ended up doing things like you got points for doing stuff, and whoever had the most points would win. So you get points for completing part of a haunt or doing like beating an event card or something like that. And I sort of got it to work, but I was making more of a mess and sort of a desire not to get rid of it because I loved it so much, which I kind of knew at the time, and I certainly knew after the fact. And then I even managed, I think, to work with a marketing and salesperson to get Barnes & Noble interested. And, I'm like, we've got sales, we can do that. And then one day they just came in, they're like, no, time's up. But pencils down, this is going to the Wizards. Right? Like, we gave you 6 months and you've made a mess. So that was a real down day for me. I remember I came home and I'm like,
Yeah.
So went off the Wizards of the Coast, and then Mike Sullenker and his team looked at it, sort of seen the mess I had done, and then kind of backed it up to an earlier version and got rid of the 3 levels and sort of ended up on what was the intermediate level rule set. Some of the things for advanced they took out, and got rid of some of the intro stuff I had done and some of the point stuff, and then had the horrible job and no time to do it to balance it, and did all right in some, and some didn't do it. They added the like the gymnasium where you would gain a might if you worked out, but there was nothing in the first edition where you couldn't just stay in there and do it like 7 times. So they did some stuff that ended up not working as well, and so this game really had 3 dedicated, passionate people working on it. The original inventor spent a lot of the 90s working on it, myself for about 15 months, and then this Wizards of the Coast team sort of taking the mess I had given them and then paring it down and doing the development pass on it and a writing pass. So Mike and I like to joke that all 3 of us like to claim like 60% of the design work on it, but it's a big, messy game, so it probably has 180%. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Still continues to be. It used to be my favorite game I had worked on up until recently. I actually had more fun. It's now probably 3rd. Pandemic Legacy Season 1 was probably my 2nd favorite game to work on, and Betrayal Legacy actually was my favorite game I've ever worked on.
I'm not gonna lie, both of us had a real great time on Betrayal Legacy.
Yeah, played it as a group.
That was a challenge of how do I take 2 radically unstable, bizarre systems that a lot of people have problems with, and try to put them together in a good way and not just give in to the problems that exist.
No.
So that was, and they put the Betrayal at House on the Hill because they wanted to do Betrayal at, which was really clever because then there was Betrayal at Baldur's Gate and Betrayal at, I forget where we ended up. I helped on the Scooby-Doo one that just came out. I was a consultant.
Is it the Scooby-Doo and Betrayal at Mystery Manor?
Mystery Manor, yeah. was my time on the trail. So some of the characters in there, like their birth dates are my birth date or my brother's birth date, or some of the names in there are the woman who my ex-wife used to work for had been young kids who are probably like 28 now. They had two kids, Jasper and Brendan, and then there's a Brandon Jaspers and stuff like that. And so he is named after my friend's daughter, who's now 20. I was playing the original sometime in the past year. I'm like, oh look, my brother's birthday. Oh look, my other brother's birthday.
That's a cool little Easter egg.
I like that.
I don't think I've ever heard before. That's great. Well, Rob, we want to thank you very much for joining us. I mean, I really hope that we could do a follow-up video to this because, I mean, we haven't talked about HeroScape yet.
We haven't even talked really... We've touched on it, but we haven't really talked about, like, the restoration games.
And we haven't even talked about the invention of
games
Legacy.
Doesn't come on the scene until... We still got 13 years.
Yeah. Yeah, so we hope we can have you back. We'll talk a little bit real quick right after we're done wrapping this video up and stopping the stream.
Okay.
But if you ever want to catch us doing this live, watch us at twitch.tv/everydayboardgames.
You can find the re-uploads at Everyday Board Games Podcast 2020 on YouTube. If you're not subscribed, please do so. As well as the audio versions are on most major audio podcasts, which include Google, Spotify, Amazon. We are currently working on iTunes as well.
And if you want to contact us directly with designers you want us to talk to or ideas for future episodes, email us at everydayboardgames2020@gmail.com.
And you can also find us on Twitter at EBG Podcast.
And with that being said, we want to thank Rob Daviau for joining us for this awesome board game breakdown so far. And I've been Daniel.
And I've been Daniel.
And we want to thank you for watching Everyday Board Games.
Have a good one.
And so we're stopping the recording right now. I'm going to stop the stream, and then we'll be almost done. And thankfully, stopping the stream takes a lot less time than apparently starting it.
It's actually kind of fun to revisit this stuff, and I'm like, doesn't everyone know this? Didn't everyone else live it? I'm like, no.
Yeah, no, it's always interesting. I love talking to the designers of the. We're still on Twitch right now, just so you know. But I love talking to the designers, and I love. Like they bring up all these great stories that they hadn't told anybody in years, or like games that we'll always bring up because we try to be pretty thorough. And they're like, yeah, no, I haven't thought of that game in forever, but now that you bring it up, I'm gonna have nightmares now.
Yeah, you skipped over. What's it called? Pathways of the Deep.
Which one?
Pathways of the Deep.
Okay, I don't think I saw that.
Atlantis, Pathways of the Deep. I don't mind.
Oh yeah, we did see that one. We weren't sure about that one.
Yeah, that was my first. We can pick up on it. That was my first original design from scratch. A lot of other times it was Stratego or Risk, where I had a base. I've made my career of picking bits and pieces of existing things and putting them together. But it's not very good.
Well, I mean, if we do a future episode, we're done streaming, so
Okay.
yeah, we're not live anymore. But if we do a future episode, which we hope you'd be willing to come back with us, we'll definitely bring that up.
We also understand you're a busy man, so if it's within 6 months or so,
I'd rather schedule it. It'll probably take 3 of these. I realize.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, probably.
If they're an hour apiece.
We did 6 years out of 22.
Well, your career basically matches with another person we interviewed, Kirk Covert from Smirk and Dagger. And his took us 3 hours for his full library, so I won't be surprised if it takes us 3 hours for you.
Yeah. Just to let you know, we are gonna, once we upload this video, we'll send you the links to like all the podcasts, so feel free to share if you'd like. I'll email you on the same string that we have been. I'm starting a new job this upcoming Monday, so we'll just have to figure out schedules if that's it. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was unemployed for 6 months as of November last year. I was a teacher, and I'm done with teaching. But then I've had 3 jobs in the past 3 months, so it's like very different thing.
2020 is a thing.
Yeah,
which might make it harder to record during daytimes.
Yeah. So we'll definitely figure that out.
I tell you what, get started on your job, figure out what your schedule is, drop me an email. Let's get something in before the end of the year.
Okay.
Works for us.
If nothing else, like I enjoy doing it, I enjoy talking, but it also is a great way where I can just point my kids, well, they're older now, or my grandkids someday, or someone like, this is what I did. If you just go watch this 3
Yes.
hours, I talk about
Yeah.
my job.
Yeah, no, that's exactly, yeah. All of our designers have been, they really enjoy how we try to do it. Real quick, one question before I let you go, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Does Restoration take any suggestions? I have one game from the 50s.
Yes, but the best way is not to tell me is to go to Restoration Games and go to the submission thing.
Cool. I will do that because, yeah.
Is it the one we talked about last time?
Astron,
I mean,
yeah.
you can tell me now.
Oh.
It won't actually translate into something
Oh, yeah.
meaningful.
It's just an old game that I remember that was very unique from the 50s called Astron. I think there was another one where it has a scroll of paper that,
The scrolling paper
over the
that
filament.
goes, it's like the original literal side scroller.
yeah,
Yeah.
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 And all
Yeah,
you're doing,
that is crossed our radar once or twice.
okay, cool.
Cool.
That's all I needed to know because,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't. I'd love to look at it. I have low expectations. We could do something cool with it, but I want to start doing some funky things like that.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too. Cool, Rob. Really, thanks again. This was great, and
right.
I'll get that email out to you shortly.
And you have a wonderful
All
day,
right.
sir.
All right. See ya.
Take care. Bye.